Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's installment of Washington Post Story Mode, the show where we break down all of the biggest video game news of the week. I am Washington Post video game reporter Nathan Grayson, and I am joined this week by my coworker, Washington Post video game reporter Shannon Liao, and also, let's see, how do we even want to introduce you? You've
Oh,
done so many things, so how would you like to be introduced, Cher Scarlett?
uh, I'm a software engineer
Mhm.
and a labor activist, happenstancely, a law lobbyist.
Yeah, Cher actually worked for Blizzard before, Apple, Starbucks, USA Today. Now she's a software engineer at Control Z, which is a gaming startup making a game called Dot Big Bang, which is sort of like a sandbox game like Roblox.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting game because it's a little bit more than that, but it's kind of notoriously difficult to explain. But some like really good points to me are it's like about democratizing the development of games on top of democratizing the education of the development of software in general, not just games. So we're working on partnerships with K through 12 education, help bring some coding education to kids, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
And you can get together with your friends and make games too. So, it's like, it's all these different things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Shannon, do you wanna kick us off since this has been an area of reporting for you, and I think you and Cher have already talked a fair amount. Um,
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. It's been a couple weeks. I've been doing a lot of reporting. Happy to be back on the stream, and it's such a momentous time with all of the Roe versus Wade coverage we've been doing, and the Mother's Day strike that's going on this week. So I definitely feel like having Cher Scarlett on the show right now is like a perfect moment to be discussing all the different labor movements within the tech industry and the games industry, and yeah, we can start off with some of the news that came out 2 weeks ago. When Cher, your lawyer filed a labor complaint against Epic Games for some experiences you had when you were interviewing with Epic. I don't know if you want to start off getting into it
Yeah,
with your summary.
sure. So I had interviewed with Epic right as I was leaving Apple. And I had been kind of talking to them a little bit before that. I was a referral, and there didn't seem to be any concern about what was going on. In fact, a lot of the people I talked to seemed to think like, oh, this would be a great match because it's like, and it's going to make for great news for both parties, right? Because it's like, oh, Share versus Apple, Epic versus Apple, and for me, like I had watched so much of what the CEO had talked about that it just felt very authentic and like a really great place for me. And just like what I'm doing now at Dot Big Bang, I was very excited about the democratization of games development and participating in that. And I thought that Epic would be a really great place to do that. And that was going to be a core part of the job that I was going to be doing. So I was very excited about it. And there were a bunch of different snafus that happened in the beginning of my kind of interview process. To that when I ended up interviewing on the team that I wanted to be on, that really wanted to me, it was a very very fast process where they really wanted to hire me prior to this December 10th date before holiday shutdown. And at no point did I think I wasn't getting offered a position. Like everything was very positive. All the feedback I got was very positive up until the very last day when I had I think it was like two interviews that day, and it almost like felt like they were just a formality. One was with the recruiter, and at the very end of the final loop. And typically, in my experience, which I've been in, software engineer for like 17 years now, if you make it that far, you are probably getting an offer because they don't want to waste anyone's time. So if they've decided prior to that they're not hiring you, they're not going to waste your time. They're not going to waste anyone else's time. They're just going to let you know, like, hey, it didn't work out. We either went with someone else or what have you. So while I was talking to the recruiter who indicated to me that I was going to have an offer later that day or the following morning, I got this form to fill out that was like it was like a request for outside activities. And when I was originally told about this form, it said verbatim in the email that they give it to you to look over, and that you can fill it out ahead of time if you want to. You don't have to, but they are not going to actually request you to fill it out in a DocuSign until an offer is about to be made. So all of these things were like set up to like, oh, okay, everything's going to be fine. I'm going to have another job within the next few weeks. And I remember talking to you and I was like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got this job, but I didn't even tell you what it was. I was just like, it's in your wheelhouse because it was games, right? So I figured that you would be like the person most interested in where I was going. And so that didn't happen. And I remember I talked to you about it and I was like really confused because the whole time I was talking to everybody along this process. Like I was talking about everything that was going on, and there was no indication, one, that they were interviewing anyone else, and two, that I wasn't going to get an offer. And so I got this very awkward conversation a few days after the final interview, after the hiring manager had reached out to me on LinkedIn to say that he wanted to keep in touch. And I was like, so does this mean I'm not getting an offer? Like I've heard nothing, and I kind of let it lay dormant. As you know, I went through something similar with Mozilla, and they actually they everything went really, really well with them, and then all of a sudden they ghosted me, and it was super, super weird because again, I made it through like the final rounds. It was kind of like, oh, you'll hear from us, in today or the next day, which is typically when you're getting an offer, you get a verbal offer first, and they let you know either that day or the next day. It happens very fast. So I was really confused on that one, and then when everything that happened with the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance with the associate job title thing happened, I reached out to Mozilla because they had kind of indicated that I should apply for a different position because it just didn't work out for that one. And so I applied to, I'm not kidding you, every single job that I was qualified for, and every single one I was auto rejected. So how do you go from like making it all the way to the end where they're like, you can work anywhere you want, why Mozilla, to auto rejecting you? So I reached out to the recruiter and I was like, hey, you told me I should apply for these other positions, and I've applied for every single one and I'm getting auto rejected, and no response. And so at that point I was like, okay, maybe something foul has happened, maybe it hasn't, I don't know, but like at this point I'm having this experience over and over again. And in my entire career, this has never happened. So I was like, maybe this is one place that I can hold accountable. So I'm going to do it. But wasn't going to do it with Epic because one, I wasn't entirely sure. And two, like, it wasn't as obvious as it was, with Mozilla. I didn't feel like I had anything that was like, oh, here's the smoking gun that, that these two things were related. But it wasn't until a friend of mine who also has been vocal in the activism, organizing, labor space. She had an offer actually rescinded, and she hadn't filled out the request for outside activities form at all. I don't know if they had talked during her interview about everything, but she called me or she messaged me, and she was very, very upset. And she was like, this thing happened to me. I don't know. I feel terrible. Like, am I not as good as I thought I was? And, as a software engineer, whatever. And I was like, who was it? And she told me it was Epic. And I was like, are you kidding me? And so I called her and I was like, I'm pretty sure that this also happened to me. And at that point, I was like, you know what? Like, maybe it's a coincidence. I don't know. But like, if with everything that I've been through with Apple and Starbucks, like I've really kind of learned there are no coincidences. Everything in a company that is making a lot of money is all by design. Like nothing is happening by accident. And so I decided to just go through with it. And I had talked with the NLRB previously about it in discussing the Mozilla stuff, and they were encouraging me to do it. But it wasn't until I had this other person that seemed to be affected where I was like, and I think back consistently too with Blizzard, where, it took me 5 years to talk about what happened publicly at all. And I think of all of the people who it happened to after that. And I just think about that again. I'm like, you know what? Like, if I don't say something and this happens again to someone else, I hold myself accountable for that. Like I want to be a part of changing things if something is going on. And maybe it did, and I can't prove it. I don't, maybe it didn't, and it is just a coincidence. But I'm not going to not go through the process because I have one, a platform and a voice that a lot of people listen to, and two, like I am somebody now who has made myself strong enough to hold companies accountable. I'm going to keep trying to do that.
Mhm. Right. I mean, to clarify, so you have a labor complaint against Mozilla as well, and labor complaints against Apple, and then with Epic. And in this case, we just have to read the statement that Epic provided, just to have their side of the story, which is, they said that they offered the position to someone else who scored higher in the interviews, and they received, your request for outside activities form after you already made a hiring decision for the position and had extended an offer to someone else, and the form did not play any role in their decision. Candidates are asked to fill out an outside activity form over the course of recruitment process, and providing the form to a candidate is not a confirmation that the offer is forthcoming.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. Yeah. So with all of that in mind, that's kind of their side of things. Why to you, and you've sort of said like to you that claim appears a little bit spurious in that, a similar thing happened to somebody else. Um, but I mean, like in a case like this, you know, do you feel like more generally people at companies or trying to get hired by companies should be using kind of like the processes that you're now using to sort of hold these companies accountable? Do you think there's kind of an implicit idea in both games and tech that doing so puts a target on your back, or that like, if you make noise about these issues that you become quote unquote unhireable or whatever?
I mean, I can tell you that it definitely feels that way. The job I have now, the CEO had reached out to me directly after I had talked about the trouble that I was having in, I mean, I was, it, the interviewing in general is tough, but as a software engineer, like, I mean, you're spending 12 to 15 hours, per job. And so if you're interviewing at a lot of places, because, for me, like I'm a parent, like I have to take care of my kid and myself and my family. And I couldn't afford to not work, so I'm interviewing at 4 to 5 places every week, and I mean it's more than a full-time job. So if for somebody like like me who has the large platform I do, that has the large voice that I do, if I'm having trouble after, what about somebody who doesn't have that kind of privilege, like, and I have a very long, if I don't say something, then somebody who has, fewer privileges than I do is going to have even harder time. And I don't know that everybody is in a position to hold these companies accountable, or to even make noise that like maybe something is going on. But I don't necessarily regret doing it, but I will say that I definitely, and even now after I have the job and I'm working and my team really likes me and I don't, have to do what I was doing at Apple, I still kind of feel like my career is over after what happened,
Hmm.
and maybe part of that is because people's perception of me has changed. And I don't know that people are really looking to me for software engineering advice or even, tech industry advice anymore. People are really talking to me more about like, like labor stuff and my experiences and, my career and how I even got to where I am, with where I come from.
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, one piece of this news, especially when you're interviewing with Epic, is that you thought they they became aware of your Apple activism, and also, like you said to them in your request for us activities form, that you were going to, testify with the House and the Senate for fair labor practices. And can you talk a little bit more about your work with like Apple workers?
Yeah. So, everything that happened at Apple was kind of interesting because I got involved in, so Antonio Garcia Martinez, who had written a book that made some derogatory comments about women in the Bay Area, he was hired last April, I think. And some people were concerned about it. I was concerned about it. It made it into, and so ended up being a part of this letter writing, asking for some accountability as to how somebody who seems to be totally the opposite of what Apple stands for was hired, and ended up getting quoted in Bloomberg. A tweet of mine got quoted, and after that, I started getting reached out to a lot by the press, and I actually got told not to talk to the press, which was immediately retracted after it was said, or not immediately. It was like within 10 minutes, retracted after it was said. But it started to like, I just was like confused. I'm like, okay, one, why am I not able to find somewhere to talk like with as like, hey, all these like 15 people have come to me about, their concerns about this hire. How do I share like a group concern? Like I couldn't find any of that. And I kept getting redirected to my HR rep and asking what my personal problem was. I'm like, I'm not saying I have a personal problem. Like I'm not working with this person. I'm saying there's all these other people. And they're like, okay, well, we don't really know how to help you. And then on top of that, then I got told not to talk to the press. Like I started to just question, like, well, why, what? Like this is illegal, and this is the biggest company in the world. It seems to me that they should know that what they're saying is illegal, and that they don't have this avenue for group concerns is weird to me, because it seems like this company has all this money. That's something they should have. And kind of fast forward to everything that happened with Blizzard, with the lawsuit and everything came out like right after that, and I started speaking out on that. And at the same time, like I'm helping my former colleagues figure out what they can do to organize with like strike efforts and other concerted activities that are protected by the law. And so I started learning about the National Relations Act so that I could be a better advocate for them and not give them bad advice that doesn't follow the law. So now, we're at the end of July. I've got all of this very fresh labor law knowledge, and I move from St. Louis, Missouri. I work remotely for Apple at this time. I moved from St. Louis, Missouri back to Seattle, Washington area where I'm from. And the Apple pays adjust based on your geography. And I asked what my pay raise was going to be moving from a low cost of living area to a higher cost of living area, and nobody would tell me. And again, going back to the like, oh, don't talk to the press. There's no way to, speak about concerted concerns. It's just like sending off like confusion in my brain of like, what? Like, this is the biggest company in the world. This doesn't make any sense. Why won't you tell me how much I'm going to get? Trying to figure out how much I was going to get paid, because I needed that information, to make decisions about living and, like all of these normal reasons that people want to know how much they're going to get paid. And ended up finding that there maybe might be a wage gap, not that I felt I was being subjected to, just based on this information that I was finding, trying to find out how much I was going to get paid. And the day that I asked about starting a wage transparency survey to kind of validate whether or not there might be an issue that we could bring up, somebody else had already started one that morning. And an hour and a half after that, they told me that they got told to shut it down. And I got told that that wasn't the first time that had happened. And I reported that internally, along with some of my other concerns that had kind of building with something called business conduct, which is supposed to like the legal side of making a complaint against your workplace. Like, so I'm like, hey, HR might be doing these things, like telling people they're not allowed to gather this data. And for me, like, even with all of these things like adding up, I'm still thinking that this is totally innocent, and like it's just a misunderstanding. This side is like disconnected from this side, so they don't know the law. Can somebody just like fix this? And it got closed immediately. Like within 2 days, it was closed without being investigated. And at that point, I started to get retaliated against, where people were filing complaints about me. I was being told that people were being told not to engage with the wage transparency survey I started, not to talk about their pay, not to engage with me at all, that it would be detrimental to their careers, getting accused of leaking confidential information, which I never did. And I retained a lawyer, and I was like, I don't know what's happened, but I feel like I feel like I'm trying to like do something good, and I feel like I'm being targeted by my company, and I'm scared. And immediately they were like, what do you want? And I was like, well, I just want you to tell all these people that they're allowed to, congregate around these protected workplace issues. They're allowed to talk about their pay. They're allowed to participate in a wage transparency survey, and maybe also stop harassing me. Like, maybe just tell them not harass me specifically, but maybe don't harass, anybody. And none of that really happened. And then I got this nasty email from a colleague of mine, basically accusing me of making our team. So I worked in global security, and basically that I was destroying the trust in the company that the company had in our team, because I was talking to the press. And after that, I filed the charge on behalf of myself and others about the unfair labor practice of telling people they can't talk about their pay, and shutting down all of these different and these rules, and all of these different things that felt like they were a violation of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff to go through. And like you mentioned, the timing of that while you were working at Apple, last July was when Activision Blizzard was also sued by the California State Department of Fair Housing and Employment, just suing them for sexual harassment and other misconduct. And I know that you participated, or like, talked to me at least about your stories at Blizzard, and talk to media in the aftermath of that. How do you think that kind of affected things, or did that also impact anything at Apple?
So my coworkers and people were really, really supportive of what I was doing, in terms of, I got like 300 people to testify with GFEH and EEOC, whether they were witnesses or victims. And at that point, like, I was feeling very supported. But the moment that I started to try to use that same, uh, I guess that same sort of thing that I did for Blizzard for Apple workers, because my DMs started to not just be Blizzard Activision people, it started to be other workers too. So like GE workers were in my, and then I started noticing it was a lot of retail
Uh,
workers telling me so.
I think your audio is cutting out sometimes at the end of your sentences. Might be
Mm-hmm.
your microphone
Oh,
sensitivity is not sensitive enough.
Yeah, something like that.
is this better?
Sounds good so far.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, it was only an occasional
I,
thing. We
ha-
could
I have
mostly
the
hear you.
input. I have the input up all the way. I don't. It's weird.
Okay, well, you can
Um,
just get really, really close to it.
it's really close to the microphone. We are
And like
getting
do
very
some
close with each
ASMR.
other.
This is a podcast session now.
Yeah.
This
Hello,
is an
everyone. Welcome to
ASMR
Washington Post
Washington
Story
Post.
Great.
Um, so, like I said, I started to notice that as we started to move kind of past, the, I guess, Blizzard news cycle, the majority of my DMs started to be more from other people, and the majority of the company that they were representing were Apple. And it was a lot of retail employees. And at that point, I wanted to find a way to do what I had done for my Blizzard colleagues. But there was no active investigation, with EEOC. I tried reaching out to EEOC about some of the like common things that I was seeing, and DFEH as well. And they were like, a certain number of people need to submit these on their own, in order for us to open a systemic probe. And so I was like, okay, well, how am I going to encourage all those people to do that? And that's where the Apple II movement came from, is, finding a platform where people could say like, yes, I want to report this to the proper authority, or I want my story shared. All of these different things that they could do. I want to talk to the press. So finding a way to get information and resources to people who had experienced these things, and then also giving them, essentially handing over my platform for people to share their stories. That was the goal, and that's what happened. And pretty much as soon as that started happening, which again, that was also in August, um, I felt like I was being pushed out of the company, and no matter what I did, there was no path back where things were not extremely uncomfortable for me, not only on my team, but in the company in general. You could see like where in Slack, like people would be talking about me and they wouldn't say my, like they're smart, they wouldn't say my name, but people would message me and be like, hey, they're talking about you, this is what they're saying. And it was always stuff that was very, very untrue. Like that I'm a litigious employee, that I've done this worked, and that wasn't the case. I had never spoken up against my employer while I worked there anywhere ever.
Mhm.
It is very interesting though, because I think you've worked at this like kind of at this point pretty broad cross section of companies that are now in the headlines for, labor movements, for unionization efforts and things like that. And so I guess like especially, taking into account that I don't think that we've talked to anybody who's worked at like both Activision Blizzard and Apple and like Starbucks. And like I was just wondering, across all of those different places, like what are some of the commonalities you've witnessed, both in terms of the way that workers are treated and kind of the forces that lead to them ultimately organizing?
I've thought about this a lot because a lot of people have asked me like, what's the common thread? And I think that, so I started to think about like, why did I work at Blizzard? Why did I work at Starbucks? And why did I work at Apple? Like, there's a lot of companies that are similar to these companies in the tech space. Why did I choose these companies? And it's because for me, like where I come from, like I come from poverty. I'm um a recovering drug addict. I dropped out of high school. I didn't go to college. I've had a lot of in my life. And because of that, like I am somebody who cares very deeply about how the most vulnerable people are treated, not only because it affects me, but because I don't want anyone to go through what I've been through. And I know that there are people who have, far fewer privileges than I do to even get to where I've been to. And so working at a company like Starbucks, Blizzard, Apple, these are all companies that use um, progressive politics as part of their brand. They care about people. They care about making sure that everybody has the same human rights, or at least that's what they portray. And at each of these companies, while I was inside, I felt like I was sold something that isn't really true for the workers to different varying degrees. When I was at Starbucks, there were a number of different initiatives that I tried to start that I wouldn't say they ever got said no to, but they would just kind of die. And nobody
Mhm.
was saying yes and nobody was saying no. It didn't make, because I felt like, okay, like this company is supposed to be, this thing. However, I'm like trying to do things that are within that scope and nobody's telling me yes or no. And that's very confusing to me. Um, but when they announced that they had 1-to-1, like 100% pay parity between men and women, I thought that that was odd because it seemed like I was being severely underpaid. And so I
Mm.
said something to my manager and I was like, hey, and I was the only woman tech lead on my team. And I also lived in another area. So, but I did my, was like, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be making like 20% more if this 100% pay parity thing is true. And my manager and the director of my team were both like, yeah, your pay is pretty low based on all of this information. And so they kept pushing and pushing and pushing HR to say like, hey, like we think that she's being underpaid and she's the only woman tech lead in this organization. We should really look at this if, we're saying that we have 100% pay parity. Well, then there was a shareholder proposal that got put on the board by I think it's Arjuna Capital. Yeah, Arjuna Capital put it on the table. They wanted Starbucks to show the data that proved that they had 100% gender pay parity. And in the time that it took them to come up with that data, I was informed that I was getting a gender-based pay gap raise. And that was 9 months after I had brought it up, after they claimed that they had it. And so they produced the data, which said that that I was one of the people who, got this pay raise, but I actually didn't get it until like 4 months after they produced the data. And then I ended up quitting anyways, because I was like, you know what, like I told you what's happening and you
Mhm.
were wearing, this thing saying that you did this. And now, and it wasn't true and you wouldn't listen to me. And I think that I found a deeper problem here and nobody seems to care. And I look at, what happened at Blizzard, even though I never really, I tried to say something like privately HR. The person ended up leaving before it was ever really addressed, and obviously I ended up leaving there. And when I got to Apple and I saw the same things happening, I think I was just at a point where, like, one, I felt guilty that I hadn't said anything about Blizzard. Two, I had said something about Starbucks on Medium, but it didn't really catch. But now I felt like, like I have people's ears off of the heels of what has just come out of Blizzard. I'm just going to say something, and maybe this company is the company that's going to come out and be like, you know what, you're right. Let's talk to our employees and like figure out like all of the kind of misgivings. And during that 6-month period, before I ended up leaving, I realized that probably no for-profit company that isn't employee owned ever just going to fully fairly bargain with their employees unless there is a legal binding thing that's forcing them to do so. And because there's that whole fiduciary responsibility thing, I guess it's a conflict of interest. And now I'm fully on, you have to unionize. And I come from working in a lot of lower wage jobs. Like, I've worked retail, I worked in food service for a long time. Like, I lived in poverty, baby, working overnights at Krispy Kreme. Like, I understand this. And I think back then I didn't care as long as it was a raise. And now I understand like the need to even out the power imbalance, even at a big company, a luxury brand like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the thing that strikes me about those three companies that we're talking about, right? Activision, Blizzard, Apple, and Starbucks are all public companies. I believe Activision and Starbucks have that shareholder proposal proposed by other people just to hold them accountable and like see their data. And at all these companies, they haven't unionized yet, but there are a lot of workers like agitating and like getting together to start organizing. Can you talk about why you think like this moment is coming now as opposed to before in the previous years where, like, especially in North America, video game companies just weren't unionized?
I think across the board, this is all heavily related to the pandemic. And I think that for frontline workers, obviously, they're kind of getting to see that their value to the company is not really being matched with the benefits and pay that they're getting. And then for, somebody like overpaid for sure, we've been kind of given more of a voice because now we're not in these buildings where it's easy to kind of segregate people. You're in Slack where you're connecting to workers who maybe have worse conditions than you, or, maybe you're just connecting with people who are like, hey, I think I might have a problem with this particular policy or, this thing that, this company is doing. And I can find people, to connect with, and it becomes, and that just naturally start organizing around issues. And we're people, like, and we represent the largest part of any company as the workforce. And you start to kind of see, we should have more power than we're being given, than these executives or the shareholders, and people, they want that control over their such a big part of their lives, whether that's improving their own working conditions and working conditions, or taking control over the ethics of the work that they're doing. And so I think that the pandemic has really driven a lot of that, from both sides. And another aspect really that I've been thinking a lot about is how, the shift in the way that what I guess becomes news can happen. Like, for example, if it would anybody know who I am to you right now? Probably not. And I think that that's the case for a lot of information that is bubbling up. The way that we have voices now is completely unheard of even 10, 15 years ago. It's totally different. Now we have a lot more control and voice than we've ever had in the past. So it's kind of like, we have, for example, Starbucks baristas, one of them gets fired. Does that make the news? No, but now they tweet about it and the right person picks it up and sees it and it goes viral and everybody knows. And now it's not even just the workers trying to hold Howard Schultz or Starbucks accountable. It's like most of the workforce in general, most of the workforce in general. So you have all extra power that we have before.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I mean, with that in mind, and especially given that you are someone who is now quite experienced in this area, what are kind of like some, I guess, pieces of advice or tips you could share with people who want to, organize their own workplaces or, get more involved in this area? Because I think there are obviously, as you've kind of expressed, a lot of potential pitfalls, especially in the ways that companies might start treating you. And so, I mean, if you were talking to somebody who was like, yeah, I want to be involved on the labor organization level. I want to help my fellow coworkers, but I don't know where to start. What would you tell them?
I definitely think the smartest thing to do is to find a way to connect with each other off of official platforms. I think the unofficial Apple Discord, the unofficial Blizzard Discords, all of these things are, and actually one too. Um, all of these places give workers a place where they can talk about issues and organizing, and having something like Apple Together, for example, where you can, set up an email and a Twitter and sense that you can communicate to the media with that isn't a particular person until you're at a point where you are really legally protected, is very, very smart. The stories that come from individuals are very, very important when it comes to organizing, because that's what basically how you get complete strangers to care about what you're going through, is having those people who can be essentially the faces of your movement. But I think in retrospect, having that be hidden until you're ready to become a bargaining, or declare yourselves a solidarity union, or start a big campaign where now you need a face. I think it's smart to kind of slow play that a little bit, and sort of organization branding that you have, let that lead the way until it's time to really push,
Mm.
just to protect yourselves. Because for myself and my co-lead, Yannicka Parrish, who was fired, it's unfortunate that that happened, but like, we're having to kind of like fight back on that now. And it would be a heck of a lot easier, if we had a bargaining unit, or, a very clear line of is protected, instead of having to argue in court that it should be protected.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just in general, it seems like there are, a lot of ways that companies have to sort of, even if they don't directly punish you for it, like even if it's not explicit, they can still pull on certain levers to make organization in general very difficult. And I mean, like I know, just like seeing that and experiencing that. I mean, do you feel like that is maybe one of the things that has kind of a chilling effect on people's desire to get involved in doing any of this in the first place? Is that they like everybody has at least one story of like, oh yeah, I know somebody who tried to organize or tried to, like get people to band together, and now they're gone, or, now they are stuck in one position and they are not getting promoted, and, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. And even looking at me, what did I say to Reed back in October? Like, oh, I can find another experience, and even with being so outspoken on Twitter, past employers, like that never seemed to affect what I was going through. But clearly, uh, things have changed. And I think that, I'm actually hopeful that our lawmakers are happening, because to me, the biggest thing that what's going on at Starbucks and in the gaming industry at Blizzard and at Apple, to me, to Yannicka, is that the NLRB does not have enough funding and does not have enough teeth to hold companies accountable in the way that workers need, when they're not, represented by a union. Like, and even getting to the representation of is so much harder than it should be, because we're just people making, I make more wages than a retail person, but
Mhm.
compared to the financial power of an or a company, a corporation, like I'm nothing, like I'm smaller than David. They're bigger than Goliath.
Mhm.
It's like an almost impossible task that requires um, the public, really, the press and the people to care, and like that's a very complicated machine for regular people to navigate.
Mm. Yeah, I also wanted to talk about, just this week is a Mother's Day strike. A couple of game developers I've interviewed said they're participating. I believe you also said that you are taking the week off and participating in the Mother's Day strike. Do you want to talk about that?
So I couldn't take the whole week off, not because of my company, but just because I had some personal stuff I was dealing with. So I took a lot of time off, and I just be there for everybody. But there's other ways that you can participate too. So I did take some time off this week. I'm taking tomorrow off to participate in the strike, and then also I just haven't been shopping at all, which not going grocery shopping for a whole week for a mom is really, really hard. And you find your kids like they don't want necessarily what's in the pantry to eat, making yourself a shorter cook idea, but it's really important, and for me, I had a tubal and an ectopic pregnancy in 2009. I would have died if I didn't an abortion, and I don't have a uterus anymore. But it's still, I think about, privacy and our right to control over our own bodies, whether we're man, woman, or what have you. And, I think that people look way beyond, the idea that like, okay, well, versus weight is overturned. That doesn't affect me. I can't get pregnant. Well, yes, it does, because it implicates for privacy and control over our own information, which is essentially what our bodies is really at stake. And with everything that I've seen recently with like facial recognition, and I know there's the way that applications and websites are gathering without users what they're doing with it is scary. I had ordered a long time ago. I ordered my LexisNexis report, which like has all of this marketing. It has like all the marketing data that LexisNexis has on you. And this thing was like this thick. It had so much information, like anything I'd ever ordered online or ordered or you purchased through like a rewards program that was connected to an email or my address or my name, roommates that I lived with. Like there was a scary amount of information in here. And I'm constantly thinking about how I try to mentally scale the information that I give away now, and how it's used, and how, my privacy is probably being invaded on a near constant basis without, me thinking about it. And there's like no way for me to mentally visualize the scale from this stack like 10, 15 years ago to what that is now with the internet. But I know that we have to start thinking about it. And when we look at something like, Roe versus Wade getting overturned, and talk about striking, as women, other keep control over that part of our bodies, we need to like be thinking way more about the implications that go beyond that particular part of control and privacy, and think about how it
Mhm.
implicates, it tells a much broader, more terrifying story.
Right. Well, this also like dovetails too, I think a little bit at least with like anti-trans laws, right? And how like some of those laws in various states basically incentivize people to tell on each other, to be like, oh yeah, this person is getting gender affirming care or whatever for their kid, even though you're not supposed to. And once again, it goes back to like ideas of surveillance and a lack of control, right? Where the idea is if we can get everybody to constantly surveil each other, then also that means that like people enforcing the laws don't even have to do that work. Society's already doing it for them.
And to tie it back to labor stuff, so one of the biggest things that I saw at Apple and a bit at other companies too is that self-policing culture where,
Mhm.
the email I got from my colleague, he wasn't a man, no manager prompted him to send that. It's the culture that was created that prompted him to send that. It's the culture that was created that prompted people to, report me and say not to interact with me, and all of these sort of things kind of tie together, and it is that surveillance culture, it is that self-policing culture, and those are the things that like lead to authoritarian um, cultures, and really that's where we're headed, and everybody should be scared. Even talking about codifying Roe versus Wade, like I've seen a lot of people talking about, they use the term women, 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 and they don't realize that what they're doing is that they're codifying that women are the ones who have babies and get pregnant.
Hmm.
And that is just as bad as saying that we can't have legal access to abortion in the state of Texas.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, one thing about this article too is I did manage to talk to your CEO of Control Z, and then he came out with a statement about abortion rights and said that your company operates in 5 different countries, but it's only the U.S. that has the most restrictive abortion laws. I don't know if you like talked to him about taking the week off for Mother's Day strike, or part of the week off, or like how that conversation went with you and your company.
Yeah, so I mean, I asked around if anybody was participating and nobody had heard of it. So I linked it to them and all the different ways they could support. I don't actually feel the need to tell my boss or the CEO about it. Like I, say like, hey, I'm going to be off this day. And they don't ask questions. Honestly, it's the first place I've worked in a really long time where I don't feel guilty about my life getting in the way, whether that's because I'm choosing it to or it is happening that way. Like obviously I've gone through a lot and I can go through a lot. And I've felt nothing but support from this company. And my hope is that, in doing the labor organizing, in continuing to talk about my experiences, whether they're my own personal experiences that I've been through or what I've witnessed, other people go through at work or outside of work. I'm hopeful that the company that I'm in now and the way that I'm treated now and the way they're treated, that this becomes the standard. And I think that the only way really to get that is through bargaining, because I don't know that a company that has that care and attention, I don't think that that's scalable, because at some point a business, a corporation becomes a machine and the workers become the cogs of that machine. And
Hmm.
so by very early, like saying, we have to organize, and we have to have a say, maintaining that bargaining seat is like super super important. And I just see that reflective in, I look at these companies that are coming out with statements, and even my own, like being supportive, and I don't want that to have to be the way that it is. I want the law to protect us, like in having time off, and fair pay, and access to health care, and the right to privacy. I want those things to be codified. And one of the laws that's new to Washington um, protects your personally identifying information, private healthcare information, from through your employee assistance programs. And that should be a surprise that you need that law. But Google used at least one person's personal information from therapy notes in a lawsuit against them, against the plaintiff, because they were able to get access through some contract law loophole to their private healthcare information. So, these are the kinds of things where it's the law that has to step us, because at the end of the day, a corporation, are they going to offer you therapy? Oh, great. But if they have access to it, are they going to use it against you if it financially benefits them? Of course they are. And those are the areas where we need to be like really, really vigilant about, ensuring that we have bargaining units, and going to, whether it's state or federal laws, to ensure that like we're actually protecting ourselves and arming ourselves with, the information of where we're vulnerable and where we need to be protected.
Yeah. Well, and also like to the point, I think that you made a really good point earlier about like the need to unionize and organize in these cases too, even when companies are like even because like I think there are two things. One of them is that as we reported on recently, very few companies are really, at least in the video game space, are really saying much about this at this point, let alone doing much with regards to, women's bodily autonomy or the bodily autonomy of people with uteruses, regardless of gender. Um, but then, even in the case of like Bungie, a company that came out pretty quickly and strongly in support of reproductive rights, um, that I talked to a number of employees who are at the company right now, and one of them made the very good point that like right now Bungie is trying to hire in a lot of different places, including Texas, and right now they are flush with money to do that. they have every incentive to try to attract employees, new employees, and like, say we're going to do this and that for you. But if that were to change, there would not presently be any protections in place for, any of the perks that Bungie is promising. They don't even necessarily have a program in place yet to provide people in places like Texas with, monetary aid, should they need an abortion or what have you. But even if that were to come to pass, they could also just take that away whenever they wanted to without workers having any safeguard beyond just being like, hey, we're mad. So yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying about unionization in that case rings very true. Is that companies will provide for you until they don't need to anymore because it no longer makes, you know, economic sense for them.
And especially when they're trying to hire you, it's interesting that people don't realize that they hold most of the cards when they're in the prospective employee, because they're trying to get you. They need you. It's not the other way. I mean, it might
Hmm.
be the other way. That's it is the other way around too. But like realistically, like the way that there's more jobs than there are people to do those jobs, and like
Hmm.
we need to go in recognizing that like we are extremely valuable and we stay extremely valuable, but there becomes a point where this power imbalance happens, and that's because we don't have these bargaining contracts.
Hmm.
I'm also curious about, what you're kind of looking for next, and we're like next steps in, all the open labor complaints you have against Apple, Activision Blizzard, Mozilla, and Epic, and also just like your activism work. Like, what are you kind of looking to do next?
So I want to keep changing laws. I think that that's the most important thing that I can keep doing. And I think with Apple, so the charges with Apple, it's very open and waiting, but all of the Apple at Washington D.C. because it's such a high profile case. And they'll come back with, maybe the way that they interpret the law is going to be different to help protect workers. Maybe they will change some laws. Maybe they will have some new ones. And there will be some sort of accountability there. It's like, but I think for me, the main thing is really recognizing whatever comes out of different things is that one, like we don't have enough protections as it stands, and how to make those protections better. Like how do we give the NLRB more funding? How do we make the NLRA better covered for not just when you're in a union but getting there, and maybe if a bargaining unit doesn't make sense, for, let's say, for Apple corporate, for example, like there's not a lot of bargaining units that really make sense, but solidarity unions are important. And how can we give those more Section 7 protected concerted activities the same kind of protections that a unionized worker would have, and maybe even rethink what a union is in 2020 versus what it was in 1940.
Yeah.
And those are the conversations that I want to have, and kind on top of that, I'm writing a book right now, and I'm going to talk about all of these different things and the way that they, the way that I guess I've kind of come up to, coming from being, in poverty into becoming a software engineer, and now, and what it really says about where we are now versus when labor laws were enacted, almost 100 years ago.
I think the beginning of what you just said was cut off. You said you're
Yeah.
working on a book and then labor laws, but there was like something in the middle that was missing.
Yeah.
Talking about how like how I come from poverty and then ended up being a software engineer and then ended up being a labor activist, and how what that says about labor laws in 2020 versus when they were enacted 100 years ago, and how things really do need to change. And I think that there's a lot, with what we're seeing with Amazon, that really also speaks to that as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really cool topic for a book, especially given how many places are employing people now as like contractors, but expecting basically full time labor and all of that. Yeah. I look forward to reading it.
Thanks.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I think I've gone through all of my questions for you, and
Hmm.
yeah, I just wanted to thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome having you on. Thank you so much.
Of course, I'm happy to be here and happy to have this conversation. It's interesting to see all of these different sectors intertwined over, essentially the same issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, before we let you go, I just want to let the audience know that the show is not over. We have another segment after this where we're going to run through some other news of the week. So don't suddenly close your browsers, please.
Yeah,
um,
stick around. The news is important. It's how we learn about things.
well, that should
Thanks,
be our
Cher.
new tagline. The news is important. It's how
You're
we learn
welcome.
about things.
Instead of
Cher
democracy
Scarlett.
dies in darkness, we just switch it out. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Cher. I'll see you around. Talk to
Mhm.
you soon, probably.
Yep.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Let's see. Well, that was great.
Yeah.
Cher's awesome. Um,
Yeah, we've covered her several times. We also did a profile. Reed Albergati did a profile of her
oh
in
yeah, I read that.
November.
Um,
I want to say.
but yeah, in any case, we are now going to move on to some other stories of the week. Um, some generally less serious stuff because it's not been a week of that many heavy hitting things aside from this, which is extremely heavy hitting, and I think probably, sort of occupied that space generally. So we already basically covered, what's going on with Roe versus Wade in the games industry. Um, so moving on from that, the other, I think, the big news of today directly concerns video games. That being that Bethesda announced that it is delaying both of its major releases that were originally going to come out this year. Starfield and Redfall have both now moved to 2023, which puts us in an interesting place in terms of video game release dates in general, because this fall is, after those delays and a bunch of others that have happened this year, looking awfully barren. Um, like basically the entire like fall video game season, usually, kind of blockbuster
Right.
period, has been
Yeah.
delayed out of 2022.
So I saw this too, and that's disappointing for Redfall. I was looking forward to that game, but
Hmm.
I do think there's the possibility. And I went on kind of funny videos like 2 weeks ago to talk about this, but like
Hmm.
there could be a possibility of like a surprise like Sony announcement, especially like June being Summer Games Fest and E3 being canceled. There
Hmm.
could be a lot of gaming announcements, news shows that pop up in the interim, and maybe they'll have sudden announcements for games coming this fall.
Yeah. Is that like are you hinting at insider info that you have, or are you just speculating?
I definitely know there's news coming. I don't know like which game specifically, but and I don't know the timing of it. But I guess it's a speculation that's slightly informed, you know.
Okay, slightly informed speculation, the best
Yeah.
kind.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think the interesting thing here, and Kotaku went into this, is that you could identify what's happening here as the Cyberpunk 2077 effect,
Mhm.
which is to say that Cyberpunk came out and was pretty massively buggy and had a lot of issues and attracted massive amounts of negative press and has become kind of the poster child for a game release that, massively hyped and then just let everybody down.
Right.
And nobody wants to be the next Cyberpunk or the next Anthem, to draw a comparison to, BioWare's live service game.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, like even up to and including Starfield, very literally, Jason Schreier, my former coworker, tweeted last spring before E3, I spoke to some folks on Starfield who were extremely worried about committing to a 11/11/22 date based on the progress they'd made so far. Next Cyberpunk was the term that they floated. So I
Even the
mean, like,
math of that date is really clean though. That's
yeah, I know,
so
right?
unfortunate.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I wish it was my birthday. Oh well. Um, but yeah, it seems like this is kind of a broader trend, right? Because you have that not just with Starfield, but I mean, I guess also like Skull and Bones, which is a major Ubisoft game that's been delayed an untold number of times. And then for Bethesda personally, one of their last major releases was Fallout 76, which similarly came out in a less than ideal state, and that kind of colored the game's reputation going forward. So I think basically everyone's like, we don't want to be that. We, having seen what happened to Cyberpunk, are now willing to do some really big delays in service of just avoiding that worst case scenario.
Yeah, so there's two things to this, right? So if the company is public and has like shareholders they're beholden to, they might like feel the pressure to meet a certain release date.
Mhm.
But Bethesda is owned by Microsoft. There's like a little bit more insulation there. And then the second thing is like just I've actually heard this from developers I talked to as well that they would rather delay a game over and over again and give it more time so that it can be perfect
Oh,
or
yeah.
close to perfection and have less people hating on it than to just release it within a very tight time frame
Mhm.
and have it tank.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was like one thing that Amazon Game Studios, for instance, took away from Crucible was that which is a failed shooter that people have not heard of, um,
Mhm.
and they like took those lessons with New World and delayed New World, the MMO, and then also with Lost Ark was slow to bring that out because taking more time with those games was overall like a better outcome.
Right. Well, yeah, but I think it leaves things in kind of an odd spot because I think for a minute, as a result of games like, oh, thank you, Cher. Cher popped into chat to say thanks, everyone. Um, but yeah, as a result of games like No Man's Sky, which came out in a less than ideal state and then was improved via free updates for years and years, continues to be, in fact, in the way that that game sort of, did this 180 from being reviled to beloved. I think that people were expecting for a little bit for there to be more games that came out in a less than ideal state and then companies just polished them until they were actually the games that they intended to originally launch. But I think that like Cyberpunk just kind of pumped the brakes on that companies are no longer brave and or like no longer brave in the sense of they would be willing to take that risk. They're just like, yeah, like we can't be the next one of those guys. Like our calculations were wrong. We can't just put out a game that's in a sort of half complete state and then polish it. And to be clear, I know developers do not want to do that, but the people with the money who want to make more money through sales are willing to take that risk. Or at least they were. Now it seems like they are not.
Yeah, I think it's because, with Cyberpunk, it was such a massive blowback with like Sony and Xbox having to offer refunds and like take the game
Hmm.
off of their stores. And that actually drew a lot of mainstream attention. It just like it became bigger than the video game world. And like people, like an average non-gamer was like, I want to buy that game, but what happened? I can't access it in the store anymore. So
Right, right.
that just like drew so much more attention and that it is something that people want to avoid.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I mean, as soon as as soon as you upset the platform holders, as soon as your like major publishing partners like Sony and Microsoft are, making moves that directly impact your ability to make money, that's when it's like, you know, that's when you are in a disaster scenario. So
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense that no one would even want to risk ending up there. And then with Starfield specifically, there's also just the fact that Bethesda has a pretty long history of kind of buggy releases, ranging between like Skyrim, which was sort of buggy, to like Fallout New Vegas, which launched very buggy. I mean, again, it's beloved now, but when it came out, it got a pretty bad reputation in that regard. So I'm sure that also Bethesda, especially for one of their first major releases under Microsoft, is like, hey, we want to stick the landing here. We don't just want to do another one of our like kind of patch it into being um a little bit more polished later maneuvers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they've already had their fair share of like fan controversy over previous titles. I remember I went to like the Bethesda show in 2019, and there was a
Mhm.
lot of like fans shouting in the crowd and their live showcase. So yeah, I mean, that all makes sense, and I think people who like want to play Starfield will be patiently waiting.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. In the meantime, fall's looking pretty barren, but I think that also leaves room for interesting indies and other unexpected games to kind of grab the spotlight, which is what we've seen already in the past couple of years due to like the pandemic and that impacting major releases.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think there will be some like cool indies. I'm already looking at a couple games. Like there's like a dating sim that's pretty diverse. There's
Mhm.
like a cooking game. And they're all coming this summer. Yeah, so that's one, and then the other one is just like this gives us more time to do reporting. So I'm
Mhm.
actually not very concerned about this. This is all great for our timing purposes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what we originally had was kind of the winter of Elden Ring. Now it's the spring of Elden Ring, and now with everything else cleared out, it's going to be the summer and additional winter of Elden or summer and fall of Elden Ring as well. It's just the
I
year of Elden Ring now.
I mean,
Um,
people have had time to play through the whole game and New Game Plus it, so at this point, I guess they might lose interest after
no,
after a
no,
couple more months, but no.
no, Elden Ring forever. Or maybe it's actually the spring, summer, winter, fall of Babylon's fall. Um, it's definitely not. But yeah, speaking of games that have come out from major publishers and then just flopped horrendously in recent times, Babylon's Fall is, of course, from Square Enix and Platinum Games, usually, both of a high pedigree. In this case, though, they released a live service game that just did not take off at all. Um, and it's gotten so bad that, let's see, what was it? Um, in recent times, it sank to a player count of just one,
Hmm.
even though it is a major online live service, always connected video game, which is pretty wild given how recently it came out. And so a couple of publications, Rock Paper Shotgun included, interviewed the one person playing Babylon's Fall.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and
Y You would
oh, go
think
ahead.
that the people making the game would also be playing it.
Yeah, you would think. Well, I mean, it's also a Japanese developer, so I'm guessing they're playing on Japanese servers.
Oh, yeah, so it's
If
like
who knows, maybe they're just like, nah, man, I don't like this game. It's garbage. No. um, but yeah, no. So like I always find this interesting. Like I think this slots into the same area of intrigue is like when you get to watch like the final breaths of a dying MMO when like the servers have not been taken offline yet, but they're just like three people running around. And it's like, why do those three people stick around? Why do they keep coming back? And in this case, the person who is still playing said, "I suppose the appeal is in its unpopularity. Despite being an MMO, no one is really talking about it, and I don't imagine many people have even played it. When you factor in the fact that you can finish the vast majority of the game's content solo, there's something appealing about being one of the few people to experience it. It may not be a good experience, but it's certainly unique."
wow, what a loner. Um, great for them. I mean, I was playing MapleStory 2, and that shut down as well.
Mhm.
But, like, when I got the notification it's shutting down, I was like, "I'm not gonna touch this game ever again," because all of the hours I've spent, the hundreds of hours I've spent in this game are going down the drain, and
Mhm.
there's no more there's no point. Same thing with Crucible. I was, like, enjoying Crucible, and then that was shutting down.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so I feel like I come to this with the opposite mentality of, like, why
Are
would I.
you implying that maybe, like, when you begin to play a game, that's like a mark of death? That if it's a game you enjoy, then that game will just get shut down eventually?
I mean, that could be said about every game for every person.
Wow,
Eventually,
that's
e
deep.
everything shuts down.
Additionally, have you thought about time recently? Time sure is weird, right?
Yeah, no, I think this should be the new name of our stream, and the theme every week is time, how time flies or dies.
Whoa, dang,
Yeah.
that's dark. Um, but
Uh,
yeah. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
the other thing I was gonna say is, like, Babylon's Fall, Crucible, maybe there's, like, a theme here of, like, any biblical reference that you give to your video game as a in the title is, like, maybe dooming the game now.
I mean, no, to your point, Godfall also did not, I mean, I guess it sold all right. Gearbox keeps making things of it, and they, like, ported it to last gen platforms and stuff, so I guess maybe it did well enough to justify. I don't know. I'm gonna still include it as evidence of this theory. So yeah.
Thanks. I
Yeah, no
appreciate
problem.
it. Cool.
So, I'm really looking forward to when God of War Ragnarok just completely flops.
No. I said biblical. I mean, is that biblical? I don't know.
I got it's God, close enough.
It's Nordic.
Um, anyway, speaking of games that are, maybe not necessarily on the path to surefire success, um, Overwatch 2 continues to be up and running in beta mode for now. The new season of the Overwatch League debuted over the weekend, and yeah, I mean, people watched it. Was it that enjoyable to watch? That's another question. But one notable thing that happened during the debut of this season of Overwatch League is that basically professional players pulled off a very creative maneuver that nonetheless Blizzard ultimately deemed illegal. And yeah, so basically what ended up happening is that and I guess this is something that they've considered illegal for a while, but it's also one of the pitfalls of running a professional esports league on a beta version of a game is that
Right.
basically there are areas in the map that don't have correct barriers over them, and so you can basically like go over buildings and stuff like that when you're not supposed to be able to. That is exactly what this team did. Let me go to the video. um so you will see, I'm gonna embiggen it. I'm gonna try to embiggen it. It refuses to embiggen. Sorry, everyone. But yeah, so you'll see that basically they put down a wall, a May ice wall on a roof, and use that to slide over that rooftop. You're not supposed to be able to do that at all, and completely catch the enemy team unaware, which is a really fun play because it's like high flying and exciting, and like it immediately turns the tables. But you're not supposed to be able to do that. So upon review, Overwatch League head Sean Miller said that yeah, the rule was made clear before the season began, and that they were not supposed to have done that. So they had to basically um, redo it.
Hmm.
The team that pulled off that trick still won the map ultimately,
Right.
but it's just kind of like, you know, for a game that sometimes can, because I think one of the things that Overwatch struggles with as an esport is that there are not that many like impactful mid-match moments. Like the I think that if when it's fun to watch games when like there are mid-match narratives, right? When there's something compelling happening that you can follow and that you're like, oh man, that was a really impactful moment in the progression of that narrative. And
Hmm.
I feel like Overwatch just doesn't have a lot of those. And this is one. This is one case where that occurred. But then they were like, no, it's illegal. Can't do that.
Right. Well, I mean, this is an interesting question of like, how do you run an esports tournament on a game that's in beta? And then are they going to patch this? Like, is this a exploit they don't want anyone to
Oh yeah, they're
use?
definitely gonna patch it. It's probably
Right.
already patched.
Yeah. So, I mean, also just like if that team is already winning
Mhm.
and they're going to win no matter what, like it kind of doesn't matter. But yeah, this is just like it's an interesting challenge to think about. Them
Yeah.
running their league, Overwatch 1, Overwatch 2 at the same time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, that part's definitely an interesting challenge. But I think that it's also like it points to the kind of continued issue that Overwatch 2 seems to already be having, which is just that like in trying to cater to esports and kind of more high level individual play and mechanical skill, you lose out on some of the fun, like some of the more unique over the top strategies that could develop if the Overwatch team kind of tuned for that, or like said, okay, let's make a game that's more rooted in like the ridiculous abilities that some of our characters have, like Maze Ice Walls. And like,
Mhm.
just how far can we take this? What's the most ridiculous thing that people can come up with? Instead of saying, like, oh, you came up with a creative strategy. Too bad. You're not allowed.
Yeah, I
Um,
really don't think they're trying to make the league super fun and experimental. I feel like that's a different game,
Yeah.
you
Oh, it
know?
definitely is. I mean, I agree completely, but I think that's the game that Overwatch was trying to be way back in the day before the league was conceived. Once a
Mhm.
kind of pro esports element came into the picture, then the design philosophy shifted, and the culmination of that philosophy is Overwatch 2, which is a game that is definitely more kind of buttoned down and first person shootery, but is also less like, hey, we have all these characters with ridiculous abilities. What can we do with them? Um,
Yeah.
and that unto itself becomes a bit of an issue because Vice published a really good piece on this. I think today, friend of the show, Renata Price, specifically wrote this. Overwatch 2 is not a very good sport, and
Mhm.
yeah, this is, however, a very good take.
Spent
It's
several
very well
hours
argued.
watching Overwatch 2. Wow.
Yeah,
Dedication.
the points that she makes are again that yeah, since 2016, Overwatch has been defined by the fundamental tension between its designer's intent to create the next esport and to create an approachable FPS for a mass audience. This has led to, at various times, one or both of those communities feeling frustrated with the state of the game at any given moment. Um, and then, like, with regards to watching Overwatch 2, the points that she makes are that it is, again, a game that just, they, the narrative through lines and matches are not really there, and in their place you just have chaos and like lots of deaths that are not that impactful because characters just run right back into the match, and so just like watching it moment to moment is just not that enjoyable. And that being the case, it's like, okay, then why is this an esport?
Okay, so like the whole Overwatch 2 being an esport already thing is like happening It's really different from the way that, like, Valorant or Super Smash,
Mhm.
run their esports scenes, like, where it grew organically,
Right.
and, like, Nintendo is not supporting, Smash, and, yeah, this is like, "Oh, I'm not even done with my game, but here, like,
Mhm.
start your esports," and I'm not surprised, just, like, the way that I'm playing Overwatch 2 right now, I don't see much variety beyond, like, just a couple of matches.
Mhm.
And then it also reminds me of like when I was talking to like people who are playing League competitively, professionally. They don't really like use like a new champion that's just been released in competitive
Mhm.
play immediately. Like they would work up to it, right? And they would not employ ridiculous creative strategies either.
Mhm.
There's like a meta, and you stick to it. And yeah, so I just don't feel like there is room to be creative and wild with Sojourn
Mhm.
and new plays with Overwatch 2. Not yet.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that the point that Renata makes really well here is that like in order for an esport to be enjoyable to watch, it needs to be like visually readable. Um, and like that's how you like end up getting those narrative arcs, right? So like Valorant, for example, or Counter Strike, they're really good at this. In that like there are a handful of players, if any of them die, that's a huge impact to the team because they die once and they're out of that round. And so like every shot counts, every maneuver counts, everything is like just dripping with tension. Whereas in an Overwatch match, generally it's just a bunch of like pile-on team fights. Characters respawn, they come back, and it just like occurs over and over and over. And so like the example she gives that I really like is in the early days of the Overwatch League, there was a meta called GOATs. It was named for a team. And the idea was basically like as much defense as possible. So it was three tanks and three supports.
Mhm,
And the thing about that is, was it fun to watch? No. But it was actually readable in that, like, basically anything that actually did happen, any death that did occur was highly impactful because as soon as you took out one part of a goat's composition, the entire thing crumbled. And
mhm.
so, like, it's just this very interesting moment of like, Overwatch can be a game that you can at least like watch and read, but it has to be like its most boring version. It's just like there's so many different ways Overwatch does not fit this idea of an esport, or at least what we know to be a good idea of an esport. So anyway,
S
it's a good article. Everyone should read it.
so what you need is, like, a cinematographer to go in and, like, record everyone's footage of their game and then,
Mhm.
like, repackage it to say, "This is what happened. Here's a movie."
Heh. Yeah, potentially. I feel like that would not work super well in a live format, but
No, absolutely not. It's only VOD. I mean, live viewership
right.
was never so very good, so
Yep. Yeah, definitely true. Well, let's see. Moving past Overwatch into games that kind of helped kill Overwatch. Um, so
yeah,
apparently,
okay.
Fortnite is going to very soon release an entire like. So they're going to release the Unreal editor for Fortnite,
Mhm.
basically in a bid to compete with Roblox, which I find interesting.
I was just
Tim
going to
Sweeney said this
say
in an interview today.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, if you had a game where you're allowed to climb walls and scale buildings,
Mhm.
that's Fortnite Creative.
Yeah, yeah, kind of. But yeah, so specifically, the head of Epic, Tim Sweeney, said, "Later this year, we're going to release the Unreal Editor for Fortnite. The full capabilities that you've seen in Unreal Engine opened up so that anybody can build very high quality game content and code and deploy it into Fortnite without having to do a deal with us. It's open to everybody." And yeah, so let's see, saying that their aim is to make a first class outlet for reaching consumers, blah, blah, blah. They make comparisons to Steam as well as Roblox. And, that makes a lot of sense because if we're talking about like games that appeal to young people that are played by young people, like the audience for Roblox is even younger than the audience for Fortnite. And also, like, I think more consistent and vital because they get to make their own experiences. Because, like, where Fortnite has gotten stale over time, Roblox can keep reinventing because people keep making new stuff for it.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Roblox is entirely generated, user generated, right? And then Fortnite is mainly people go in there to hang out with friends and then maybe think about Fortnite Creative as like another option.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I it is interesting that this is coming this year, which is Fortnite's like fifth anniversary.
Mhm.
And like people are still playing, but we don't really know how many people are playing.
Yeah. mean, it's still a very popular game. It's still one of the top games on Twitch, even when it's not like the top game anymore. But yeah, what I also find interesting about this timing is that I mean, like, Fortnite has had creative tools for a while, albeit not to this degree. But that's a little bit odd in that like Epic has always been, until Fortnite came along, honestly, like the big thing for Epic was the Unreal Engine and the Unreal Editor, which they have found numerous ways to like try to get into the hands of as many people as possible. And so the fact that they are only now fully like tying that into Fortnite, which is, obviously their biggest game, it's kind of surprising. I figured they would have done something like this sooner.
Yeah, it definitely seems to come really late, but, like, I also keep track of the Epic Game Store. It's, like,
Mhm.
new features, and people were asking for a shopping cart for the Epic Game Store for years, and Tim Sweeney was like, "No." And then finally, I think they just, like, recently deployed a
Mhm.
shopping cart after the store has been out for years, so you previously could not like, if you wanna buy 2 items, you can't
Mhm.
add it to your cart, there's no cart, so you'd have to just buy it and check out immediately. So, I mean, talking about delayed features, that's one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, Epic certainly takes its time, and I think that their store is a really good example of that. I guess when you are that big of a company, you can afford to. I don't know. Um, But yeah, at any rate, it'll be interesting to see if this can actually like compete with Roblox, or even if it does, like if there's even any overlap here in terms of people like viewing the appeals as similar. Like, will there be crossover between Roblox and Fortnite audiences as a result of this, or is Roblox so entrenched as a platform that people won't move from it? Because I think that it's tempting to view Roblox as a game. That's not quite right. It's a platform, and what we've seen with platforms is that people don't generally move off of them unless they absolutely have to because their communities are there. And the thing that makes people most likely to go to a platform in the first place or leave for another one is the people who are on it.
Yeah, we had a Roblox live stream a couple months ago, and it's probably worth, asking those same developers if they would move. But like we already talked about discoverability on the Roblox front page, and people have had chances for their games to show up on the top page and like get clicked on and
Mhm.
get lots and lots of plays through. So yeah, to then switch over to a whole other platform would be really challenging.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, that said, I think part of the reason that the timing for this is as it is, Epic, like many other companies, is making a bid for the metaverse. A Roblox is obviously another one of the companies making a bid for the metaverse. I think one of their big appeals, one of the things they can say is, "Hey, look, we already have all these built-in content creation tools. We already have people building what we essentially view as the metaverse. We have a major head start." Um, with all that in mind, however, metaverse prospects are not looking so great at the moment. This week, Facebook laid off or is preparing for cutbacks in its Reality Labs division, which is kind of the center of the company's bid to create the metaverse.
Right.
So I think that especially in regards to recent losses on Facebook's part with regards to stock and shares and things like, or the stock market and things like that, they're probably reevaluating to what degree the metaverse makes sense as something for them to pursue at the scale that they were originally planning to pursue it. Um, it-
Yeah.
yeah,
I've already seen this news, but, like, it was framed by other tech reporters as, "Look, NFTs are failing immediately."
right, right.
Like, NFTs barely lasted 1 year before they're already tanking. And this is just, like, I guess, conflating the idea of the metaverse, blockchain, virtual reality, and also NFTs. They're all
Yeah,
really
don't forget
different.
crypto.
They're all different, right? And
Mhm,
I think that, when you bet on the metaverse, you're, like, doing a long time investment, but this is, like hasn't been that many years yet, hasn't been that much time, and they're
mhm.
already doing, cutbacks, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it definitely seems like the initial enthusiasm around these ideas as surefire moneymakers has cooled. Um, and so it's one of these things where, like, to your point, on one hand, it's definitely a long-term ploy to build something up, but on the other hand, the individual component parts are the things that people saw as being major components. Those being, crypto, NFTs, other elements like this are individually having trouble. And so when companies look at that and say, like, well, our plan was to bring them all together and they're struggling, it's like, time to maybe like reevaluate a little bit.
Yeah.
This is not to say that everything that these things are all going to like disappear and die necessarily, but it is to say that I think companies are getting a little bit more maybe getting a little bit squeamish. There's also the Ubisoft financial call this week with zero mention of NFTs after they were initially very excited about NFTs in recent interviews. So again,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like when you first mention NFTs and cryptocurrency in
mhm,
your shareholder call and your earnings call, it does like maybe improve your stock price. But
mhm,
right now, like stocks are not. A lot of stocks are down. The tech industry is facing questions to like some tech startups having trouble raising money.
mhm,
So like all of that is just part of the same like economy. But
mhm,
what is happening specifically with Facebook, with Meta, is like pretty opaque from the outside. I would be really curious to see like more investigative
mhm.
journalism on that front.
Yeah, me too. And I imagine we will see it because there are like 400 reporters dedicated solely to Meta at this point. So
400.
yeah,
That's great. You don't have that nearly that many for video game companies.
yeah, I know. Real bummer, right? Oh well, more for us. Anyway, let's see. In less consequential news, some trailers for things that we can look at.
Ah,
Yeah, so the Resident Evil show that Netflix is making got its first trailer today,
I haven't watched
and
this yet.
me
Exciting.
neither. Let's do a live react. Oh man, this is gonna be crazy.
Should we get DMCA
Lily,
for this?
Jade,
Did you check?
Eh,
welcome home.
I'd like to build the world a home.
I really think you guys are going to love it
It has a
here.
Black Mirror feel to it.
kind of does, yeah.
It also has like a Facebook ad.
Eh, ah. Oh, that's an angry rat.
Oh wow,
Oh,
intense.
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
This is awesome. What? Okay, the bear thing was weird. So it premieres soon.
Yeah. Well, in
Yeah, in
in
July.
three
Um,
2 months.
yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. It my first impression is that it looks like pretty much any other zombie thing.
I know it's like pretty standard because like oh it's slow and then it starts off and then you have that like slow happy creepy music in the background.
Yeah.
No, I would watch it.
Yeah, I mean, it does like I think Resident Evil also like as much as it's known for zombies, it's also known for like various iconic enemy types and zombie and various bosses and like characters like Jill and Chris Redfield and like I none of those are present in this trailer. So
Mhm.
I am just curious about like what kind of tie to Resident Evil will this have? And you know, the Resident Evil movies by Paul W.S. Anderson, I think is the director. Also were only loosely tied to the game universe, so it's not like we haven't seen that before. But yeah, it is kind of like, okay, well, that looks like another zombie thing for now. But it's also a short trailer, so who knows?
Yeah, I would give it a chance. I watched the Dota Netflix show and
Mhm.
also Castlevania without playing much of the games, and like they're very compelling. Uh, so I think I have high hopes for this one.
Yeah, the comments are not positive. Yeah, this couldn't look less like Resident Evil. I don't get it. It can't possibly be this hard to make a faithful, well done Resident Evil adaptation. Yeah,
Do you think they're mad because of who's being cast? Like maybe like the characters don't look the same?
I mean, maybe. I think it really does just like not really identifiably look like Resident Evil though. And so at
Yeah.
that point, I think that people can justifiably ask the question, why are you calling this Resident Evil?
Yeah. Well, I would still watch it. I think people really want everything to be faithful adaptations, and that can get kind of old.
Yeah. Well, speaking of faithful adaptations, good news. Darn it, it's loading too slow. My comedic timing has been ruined. Good news on the TV show of Halo, Master Chief just had sex.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Are,
right.
are you allowed to talk
Congratulations,
about
Master
this in the
Chief.
stream?
I mean, this is very important. And it's very relevant. It's the somewhat controversial TV show adaptation of Halo.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was invited to watch that. I never got around to watching it.
yeah. Apparently it's been up and down. Like, I think initially people were sort of skeptical of like the first couple episodes, but it's gotten good, I've heard. And yeah,
Mhm.
now it crescendoed in a moment that once again has kind of lost people. Because I guess the setup is that like Master Chief ended up having sex with like a clear kind of enemy character. And I guess people like sort of look at this as him not like generally Master Chief's approach is to try to save as many lives as possible. And so the fact that he took a break from that to like hook up with an enemy is pretty pretty out of pretty out of line. And also, like, look, even the Washington Post, Gene Park, has largely been positive on the show thus far, said he's actually mad and is reconsidering his whole stance on the show as a result of Master Chief having a great time.
That's hilarious that Gene said that. Cool. I mean, thanks for the spoiler. Now I have no reason to watch the show.
Wow. No, now you have every reason to watch the show. Are you kidding? I just gave you the best reason you could get.
Mhm.
Um, but
Debatable.
yeah, it's especially funny because Cortana, the AI that is part and parcel with Master Chief's armor, apparently just like watches while this happens. And the whole thing of like the relationship between Cortana and Master Chief has always been kind of a mother-son type of relationship. Um, and so yeah, Decider's write up. The headline is Master Chief loses his virginity while his mom watches,
Oh God.
which
Okay.
is, yep. So anyway, that's the state of the Halo TV show.
So odd.
Hopefully Resident Evil won't do this.
I mean, they should. I'm sure that would get them angrier comments, and that would be funny.
Oh, okay. Well then never mind. Washington Post says Resident Evil make the Master Chief have sex.
Mm, Master Chief and Resident Evil.
Yeah. Also add the Master Chief to Resident Evil. All right. So in much more wholesome news,
Thank
significantly
you.
more wholesome, G-rated news.
Let's bring us back to a
A
child-friendly stream, as we
yes,
always aim to be.
yes, and we always fail to bring. Um, a TikToker found an abandoned Nintendogs cartridge, and so they decided
My eyes
to
have been wandering in the carriage.
yeah. So
And I am pretty sure
they found it on a
that
train, I
this is
think.
a game for the Nintendo DS. Let's find out.
So they went up,
Yo, it literally.
they grabbed it.
Oh,
It's
oh
Nintendogs.
boy.
That is notable because
poor baby.
those little dogs just kind of stay on that cartridge indefinitely. So
A night
took it
night
home,
out. I found this about.
put it in their
Take this
DS.
out.
It can be difficult to clean them.
Didn't work. Got a cleaning kit for the
Maybe
game.
this is the plan.
Oh,
To
it's too
resuscitate
dirty.
To
it.
a point like this. Okay, yeah, I'm in.
It was
I'm in.
gross.
So let's keep scrubbing. This one here looks
Very
really,
gross.
pretty messed up. Yeesh. This is rough. Here's so scratched up.
But eventually got it working. So finally, let's see
Abandoned
these
Nintendog
dogs.
on my last train home. So
Little snoozing. Hey!
Sleepy puppy.
Whoa!
But you know,
With,
still
There's
it's still
two.
okay. Two
there's
puppies.
two! There's a black lab.
Is that
and a
a?
little snoozing Shiba. Oh my god, they're okay and they're playing.
Oh,
Tyson and Enzo. Oh.
yeah, their names are Tyson and
Wow,
Enzo.
that's kind of messed up that he can just steal someone's pets.
That's your takeaway?
Yeah.
I mean, clearly whoever this is,
Oh
they
my
abandoned their
God.
pets on a train.
Seems like it just fell out of their bag.
Oh my
No.
God, look at
No, this
them.
was intentional. So many people, like,
It's
you know, they
okay,
try to
you don't
adopt
have to worry
virtual dogs and
now.
they realize it's a
You're
big
okay.
responsibility and they leave them
Oh
on the
my
side of the
God,
road.
I can't believe this.
Sad but true, there are millions of Nintendogs
Oh,
cartridges
I do.
left on trains
That was
every
a very
year.
good little boy.
Well, yeah, they can just
Yes.
become NFTs.
Have the food. Have the
Wow.
food, please. Oh, you
That's
must
not
be
where I wanted that to
starving.
go.
Oh, look at them. They're ravenous. Let's
Yeah, they're
find
very
out some more
hungry
about
because they haven't
these
been
guys
fed in a
first.
long time.
Tyson.
But anyway,
He's
it's a
Shiba
heartwarming
Inu
story.
called
Someone
Tyson.
saved some
Sean.
Nintendogs from
Sean
being
spent 4
abandoned
minutes.
forever.
Sean spent 4 minutes with this dog and abandoned him
Wow.
on a train.
Spent
You guys
4
both must be
minutes.
so thirsty.
Yeah,
There
so
you
you're
go,
talking about
go.
like just
My
lost.
boy
No, no.
Enzo,
This person just didn't
Labrador.
care. Messed up.
Wait, there's a microphone. I wonder if.
So anyway, beautiful, heartwarming tale.
No,
Dogs.
no. I just got them.
It's just great. You love to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. In things you do not love to see, a Twitch streamer almost burnt her home down during a
Yeah.
cooking stream. This clip has gone super
I
viral.
saw Jean's tweet about this, saying like you shouldn't add water to fire. It
Yeah.
actually makes it worse.
Yep. Add baking soda or smother it.
I guess you should add a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, if you have a fire extinguisher, that should be your first go-to. But in lieu of that, either smother it with something like heavy, or add baking soda. Those actually make it go out. Adding water just makes it mad because water is its natural enemy, and it's like, how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
So anyway, this occurred, and yeah, I mean, major takeaways here are just the things we just said, and then beyond that, streaming is something that demands a lot of your attention, and if you're going to perform any activities on a stream that are even mildly dangerous, perhaps either consider having somebody else be nearby, or just don't do it, because you might almost burn your home down.
yeah. I don't
Yeah.
think I knew about the water tip either. I think I definitely set off my fire alarm multiple times.
Yeah. Well, then, this is a teachable moment. We should be thankful to this streamer for nearly mortally imperiling themselves, because we've all learned
Yeah.
something from them.
Yeah, I could have learned this another way. Nobody needs to endanger themselves like that.
Oh, see, I thought this was the only way that somebody could learn this. In any case, I'm going to leave everybody on a very upsetting note. So basically, this VR company has put together mouth haptics for a VR headset. So basically, the ability to feel sensations near your mouth as a result of haptics on the VR headset. One of the ways that they decided to demonstrate this is to create a demo in which spiders crawl around on your face and you can feel it.
For example, in this
Yeah, I
Overwatch
don't.
scenario,
No, thank you.
users must walk through a spider web to get to a small clearing. Upon touching a spider web,
Actually, I've
spider web, and then you can feel it on your face. You can feel the spider web, just like in real life.
So I've actually done this before.
I hate it. This is horrible.
Later, the user must shoot a flare gun at a spider, exploding it into
yeah, shoot it.
The user. This utilizes random impulses centered on the mouth at a higher frequency.
And then I guess you can even feel like the spider goo on your face.
Yeah, there's
what a
actually
weird and horrible idea.
So there's actually and I've already been on this before, but there's a VR kind of like machine that you can ride. It's almost like a roller coaster, and like there were like only a couple from South Korea, and there's one in New York where you can ride on this like machine that like spins you around, turns you every which way, and you're having a VR headset, and you can look at these giant bugs that you fly over, and they just kind of like launch themselves at your face. So I've done that before. Very freaky and awful.
Yeah, but wait, could you feel the impact on your face? Was it physically tangible on your real face?
No.
Oh, well then you haven't had this experience yet.
No, but it's like next to a bar, so basically what you do is you just try not to puke as you're being spun around.
Yeah, I don't like that either. Anyway, VR is going in all sorts of fun directions. The metaverse is going to be filled with spiders that crawl on your face, and you can feel it. That's a guarantee.
Feel out of obligation to Jean, who's not here, metaverse is not equal to virtual reality. It's much different.
The metaverse is going to be filled with real spiders. They'll crawl in your mouth and eat your tonsils. That's a guarantee. It's real. You can quote me on it. Anyway, this has been Washington Post Story Mode. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. We do this every day, or every Thursday. Wow. If we did it every day, I'd die.
Wow.
We do it every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'll be back next week doing the same thing from now until the end of time. As ever, I do not know if we have a gameplay stream tomorrow.
Can I just say,
yeah,
it's 1 p.m. Pacific. Please tune in. We'll have a lot of like really cool guests coming soon, like top Twitch streamers, other tech reporters from across the Washington Post, and pretty much like you can send in your requests, like who do you want to see on this show, talking about gaming news, and we'll try to honor your request.
Yeah, we'll have many, many cool guests, like Shannon said, gods, kings,
Masters,
historical
horses.
figures, reanimated mummies, just really anything at all, anybody. VR spiders. In any
This just
case,
makes what I said sound like a lie, but my part wasn't a lie, so just so you know. Right.
and yeah, also, so I've been Nathan Grayson. She's been Shannon Liao. One of us
Wow.
only tells the truth. The other one only tells lies. It is up to you to discern which. This is a riddle. If you can solve it, you will win a prize.
So yeah, I've been Shannon. There's no stream tomorrow, says Washington Post Gaming. Please tune in next week and read our articles.
Yep. Until then, see you later.
Bye.